You're watching Left Foot Media. My name is Brendan Malone. Today I want to tackle the issue of so-called male privilege because I don't actually believe that male privilege is a real thing. Now, before you run screaming for the nearest exit, please stop and hear me out, because I'm going to give you concrete examples, I'm going to talk through the issues, and I'm going to explain to you as best I can why I do not believe it is logical in the slightest to claim that there is such a thing as male privilege. Male privilege is this idea that men, by virtue of their maleness, have some societal privilege, have some legal advantage, have advantage of some kind, generically speaking. Now, obviously not every male is necessarily going to benefit from that, but generally speaking, you are in a far more advantaged position just by virtue of the fact that you are a male. Well, this just doesn't stack up with the evidence at all. First of all, let me give you 3 concrete examples that I can point to, and this is just 3 of many we could use to show why society really doesn't give males or maleness a particular place of privilege or advantage. First of all, the suicide statistics. In this country, approximately 75% of all suicide deaths are males. Now, that is consistent for most countries. In fact, some other nations have even higher disparity than that. They go right up well above 75% of the deaths being males. Wherever you go, you will find that the minority of suicide deaths are females. Yet this is an issue, despite the fact that this has been an issue for many, many years now, this is an issue that receives very, very little attention, let alone practical, proactive strategies to try and remedy why there is such a great disparity here. I mean, if there really was some sort of male privilege in our society, don't you think that those suicide rates would reflect that they would actually be working in the other direction, or there'd be some sort of balance there? The fact that there is such a gross imbalance tells me that either male privilege isn't really working out for us, or it isn't actually a real thing, because men have got serious issues and struggles that are just not being addressed. And I think it is actually the latter. And the reason I think it's the latter is because we don't even talk about and address this glaring elephant of male suicide rates and the disparity here. We don't even seem to have a strategy for trying to deal with it, which suggests to me that males are not privileged. Otherwise, if males really were privileged, we would be giving this priority and funding and resourcing and public discussion. We're just not doing that. Another very clear example where males do not have privilege, in fact, where females have privilege and it's legal privilege, is the whole issue of abortion. If a male and a female, in fact, if my wife and I were to get pregnant, the two of us were to produce a child together, right? My wife has the legal right to terminate my child, and I have no consent, I have no legal comeback, I have no way of preventing that from happening. I have no legal say in the matter over the life and the well-being of my own children while they are in the womb. It's a glaring example of a society where you don't have male privilege, because if you had male privilege in your society, then guess what? Men would have the ability to decide, not females, or at the very least, both parties would have to commit to the decision together. But that is not how the law actually works. And then there is the whole issue of incarceration. In my country, approximately 92% of all incarcerated persons are males. Only between 7 and 8% are females. Now, you might look at that and say, but men are committing more crimes. Yeah, of course, that's why you have much higher male incarceration rates. But first of all, there's 2 things here. Number 1, if you think we really did have such a thing as male privilege, then why would those incarceration rates, why would there be such a disparity? Because surely the court systems would actually give privilege to men and would give them more lenient sentences, or let them have home detention, or would give them suspended sentences so they didn't actually have to go to jail. If there really was some sort of male privilege, then it wouldn't be this way. And certainly the incarceration rates shouldn't reflect such a major disparity. Not only that, but there would be major public outcry about why so many men were in jail. We would be having major discussions in society about what we can do to reduce the number of males who are going to prison. Why? Because our society would give privilege to men and it would want to focus on that issue. but we're not even having that conversation because that privilege doesn't exist. Now, what often happens is people say, oh, but you do have male privilege because you can do things or you get away with things that females don't. So, for example, you can walk down the street at night without fear of being attacked, whereas females have to carry that fear with them. Well, I don't think that's true or really a balanced claim at all. First of all, I'm someone who is a male. I am not small, I'm physically strong, and I know how to box. And in a former life, I did a bit of manpower security work, a short stint guarding events and bouncing and stuff like that. So I've been involved in tussles, I've got strength, I'm a male, and I know how to box, I know how to look after myself. But I can tell you for a fact that there are places now that I will go to, and I'm not talking about dodgy backstreet alleys with no lighting, I'm not talking about high crime neighbourhoods or streets, I'm talking about main streets in our major cities where I will go to now, and I am on a much higher alert and awareness at particular times of the day because I know there is a greater risk to my personal well-being. There's definitely a nervousness that I have in certain places, and these are major cities here. So this idea that men universally enjoy some sort of luxury of not having to think about their safety is really not true. And also, conversely, I know plenty of females who don't even think about their personal security in a lot of these same situations. It's not because they have privilege and I don't, or I have privilege and they don't, whatever you think the case may be. It's simply the way people view the world, the way we've been schooled, the way we think about and understand issues, and the way we've been taught up, I guess, to walk through life, to live life. If you've been brought up a bit more fearful, then probably that fear is going to play on you. If you're someone who doesn't really think about these issues too much, then you're probably really not going to be bothered by them too much at all, unless it actually happens to you personally. Another example that people put forward is the whole issue of sexual assault and rape, and they talk about the fact that males get away with a high number of sexual assaults and rapes. And they're talking here about cases of sexual assault and rape that actually end up in the criminal justice system. There is a high rate of those cases where you end up with a not guilty verdict. That's got nothing to do with male privilege, though. That's got everything to do with the fact that natural justice demands that you have to meet a basic standard of proof, of evidence, in order to convict a person and find them guilty of a crime. And if we didn't have those basic standards in place, then there's a really high chance that you would end up imprisoning a whole lot of innocent people who were falsely accused, and because you had such a low threshold, they ended up in jail because of this unfair imbalance in the system. Now, what this means is that when it comes to sexual offending, it can be extremely difficult to secure a guilty conviction because of the way in which this type of offending and the setting and the context in which it normally plays out. It can be really difficult to actually secure those guilty verdicts. But that's not because the court looks at the accused and goes, well, he's a man and we must treat men differently. Instead, it's because the system says we've got to maintain a standard that's here. You can't lower that standard because the risk is that innocent people will end up going to jail. And so therefore, because the standard is here, it can be a lot harder in sexual offending cases to actually reach that standard, that evidentiary, that proof standard. I understand how difficult this can be. I have friends who've experienced this trauma personally, and I understand how difficult this can be. But let's not confuse the issue and start claiming there's some sort of male privilege, and that's why this is happening. Instead, this is happening because of the reality of life and the way in which this particular type of criminal offending happens, and the fact that we need a just level, a fair and appropriate and just level of proof that is required before you convict a person of a crime. The reason that we don't have a male privilege is because we don't live in a patriarchy. Now, you might hear people running around and say, oh, we live in a patriarchy. We don't. There's only two forms of patriarchy that you can live under. One is an actual legitimate, literal patriarchal society. And in a literal patriarchal society, what happens is that a female does not have any legal rights. A female does not even really exist in the eyes of the law or in the eyes of that society as an individual. Their entire existence and their legal rights and everything else, their protections, come to them by virtue of the male head of their household. If they are young and they are not married, that would be their father, and they defer to their father, and their father gives them their legal rights, and on all major decision making, it is their father who has ultimate authority over their lives. If they were older and married, it would be their husband. We clearly do not live in that society. We do not live in a literal traditional patriarchy. That's just not true. Secondly, the other type of patriarchy you could live in is a sort of more general one in which women are excluded from governance. So they can't vote, they're not allowed to vote democratically, they are not allowed to represent the country, they're not allowed to be MPs or prime ministers or presidents or anything else like that. That is also not true of our Western nations, and particularly in my country here, we've had 2 female prime ministers already, okay? So women are able to be MPs, they are able to participate fully, they are able to vote and be involved in the governance of this country at both a local level and at a national level. We do not live in a patriarchy. We just don't. It's not true. Males and females are equal in the eyes of the law. That's why there is no male privilege. There is no advantage legally that men are given over females. And even culturally, this idea that men have some sort of preference or privilege or place of honour that gives them certain advantages that females don't have, based solely on their maleness, is simply not true. Obviously, there are differences between males and females. We enjoy, as males generally speaking, we enjoy a 40% greater upper body strength. That's a biological reality. There's really nothing you can do about that unless you go about deliberately weakening males, but I don't think you'd want to do that because as a society, for us to function well and to actually work the way we should, then you actually need the complementarity of the differences between the male and female genders. You need those differences and you need them working together well, and you obviously need a care and respect for each other which has nothing but utmost respect for the equality of male and female, for their equal dignity, their equal value, their equal worth. You know, there is no unjust way that we treat each other. So there are some basic biological realities that, create difference. But there is no legal privilege, there is no societal-wide privilege that exists just because you are a male. There are certain people in our society that do enjoy privilege though, but that privilege comes to them by virtue of the fact that they either have wealth or influence. Those are the things that give you advantage and which allow you to basically do certain things that people who don't enjoy wealth or influence can't do. Okay? A classic example of this is you could have a rich female who gets arrested for the exact same crime as a poor male does. Those 2 people could move through the justice system at the same time and in the same place, same country, same city and everything. Yet that rich female is far more likely to come out of the justice system with a better outcome than that poor male is. Why? Because she has the money and the influence to be able to get good advocacy and to secure better outcomes than what that male does, who does not have that same level of influence or income to be able to get a good outcome. In that case, what you've got there is a form of privilege, but that privilege has got nothing to do with gender and everything to do with the wealth and the influence that you wield as an individual. There is no such thing as male privilege. It's not a real thing, and I think it is completely absurd of people to keep throwing around this term without ever stopping to actually look at the facts and logically examine the claims that they are making in this regard. Because when you do that, they just do not stack up to the facts or to common sense. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time on Left Foot Media.